Yeah, you're good. We're live now, so. Welcome in to the Fantasy Playmakers podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Popelars. You can find me on Twitter at PopesFFH, joined as always by my co-host Ryan, who you can find on Twitter at Mackie_FFB. What's up, Ryan?
Not much, man. Just yet again got back from my kid's soccer game today. My son stepped his game up a little bit and scored 2 goals today. So I don't know if anybody said fantasy dynasty soccer leagues, but keep your eye out in 2030 when my son's able to get up there. But excited to talk about the AFC West today.
The AFC West, always an exciting group to talk about. We are joined by David from Triple Play Fantasy. You can find him on Twitter at dmendy02. How's it going, Dave? I wasn't going to try your last name. I feel like it's easy, but I just didn't try it. That's you can let everybody know what your last name is.
it's Mendelson, but everybody always just calls me Mendy, so that's why it's always like just in the Twitter handle that way. But man, I'm pumped to be here with you guys. Thanks for inviting me to the show.
Yeah, anytime. I'm excited. You guys over at Triple Play are definitely out of our league. Like interviews with Austin Eckler and like pro athletes. So
stop. We're all having, the same.
Having you on our Having you on the show is actually the honor, not you being on ours. So
stop. Will not accept that. I see your work, man. All the deep dives that you do with all the prospects, the dynasty work that you're doing. I mean, you have some of the best analysis in the game right now.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see after year 1 if any of the people I like hit. It's already not looking good with Kylan Hill. I had him as like 3 and he barely got drafted. So we'll see how that goes. But like Ryan had mentioned, we are going to talk about the AFC West here today. But first, Ryan, what do you got for King Sports here?
Yeah, today's episode is brought to you by King Fantasy Sports. Go check out the King Sports Draft Kit and get the advantage over the rest of your league this season. Be sure you're doing the right preparation to start your season off right. You get everything from rankings, breakouts, and values to busts and sleepers. Did your league have some funky settings? Learn how to make your own projections as well. Stop sitting on the sidelines and buy this draft kit today. The guide is only $8.99. If you use our promo code Playmakers, you'll receive an additional 10% off and get everything you'll need to not just compete, but dominate your draft leagues this season.
And I will second that. I took a look at it a little while ago. I like it. It's definitely something different. It gets updated. I don't know if you've had a chance to check it out, Ryan. Have you?
I have. I look at it. I do. I look at it every now and again just to see the updates, and they are very fast. I'm pretty sure they had their rankings updated just mere hours after the Julio trade. So they are keeping things updated and making sure that they're on top of things over there. I mean, obviously not a whole lot's changed other than the Julio trade since the draft, but they seem to be right on top of things when it comes to news and transactions and things like that.
So yeah, like Ryan said, check it out, guys. All right, let's just dive right into this. We're going to start off here with the Los Angeles Chargers, guys. Let's start off with the big topic. Justin Herbert, guys. He finished QB 10 last year, about 22 fantasy points per game. Dave, how do we expect here with Justin Herbert? Do we think he takes a step forward from that again, or do we expect kind of a sophomore slump?
So when the offseason kind of started, I was more that I thought he was going to take a step forward. But when I looked into a little bit more, I actually think he's going to take a step back. So he was QB9 last year, and that was with him breaking the rookie record for passing touchdowns with 31. And he also had 595 pass attempts, which was the 4th most in the league. And so take that already. Then you go to the fact that they brought in a defensive-minded head coach. They have a healthier defense that might actually keep them in closer games where they won't have to air it out from behind as much. So I could see the pass attempts dipping in 2021. Then you obviously have the offensive line being rebuilt, which obviously is going to help him. But then you have the downgrade from Hunter Henry to Jarrett Cook. You have Austin Eckler healthy, who obviously is going to help in the passing game, but they're also probably going to run the ball more with him healthy. So I think he probably will finish similarly, like maybe around QB9, QB10. I don't see that step up. More of anything, just the same or a little bit of a step back.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I definitely can agree with a lot of that. I just feel like, too, Justin Herbert's season last year just felt a little Cinderella-y. And he never really, I mean, he hardly had much struggle through it. So I just feel like I expect to see, like you had said, almost kind of like the same. I don't think he's going to plateau. I think he can eventually make that step. I just feel like the team, like you had said, a lot of the stuff they're doing screams outside of playing a couple of their teams in their division. I feel like there isn't going to be as much needed passing. This team, it should be a little bit better defensively. Ryan, how do you feel about Justin Herbert?
I think he's definitely in the top 8 for me. I think he's got top 5 upside with his ability on the ground, because he does provide somewhat of a rushing floor for fantasy managers. Like you guys have said, they did bring in a defensive-minded head coach, though. They got Joe Lombardi coming in as their new offensive coordinator, and he has been with the Saints for the last 5 years, I think. It's been since 2016. And from everything I've been reading, they're trying to put a lot more onto Herbert's plate this season in terms of like pre-snap reads. And I think things like that only make him a little bit better and more confident in his ability, right, reading the defense and just getting more comfortable in his pre-snap reads. And he should see an offensive line upgrade with the additions of Rashawn Slater in the draft, and they signed Matt Fiedler and Corey Linsley to kind of shore up that offensive line that they actually honestly had struggled with last year. And they made protecting him a priority this offseason. So I think he should take a slight step forward, but maybe not as efficient as last year. Because if you look at the second half of last year, he did see his production dip. And like you said, with Austin Eckler coming back, their ground game should be a little bit more consistent, and their defense will be better. They signed a couple guys. I can't think off the top of my head who all they signed, but their defense did get better in the offseason to get healthier, obviously. So I think he's definitely in the top 8. I wouldn't be surprised to see him finish around there, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see him in the top 5 if he gets a couple more rushing touchdowns than he did last year.
All right, so we got one who thinks he's going to be top 5, Ryan.
No.
Yep, I heard you say it. Let's move. But like you had alluded to, and how Dave had, and like I had mentioned, the run game. Let's talk about that. Austin Eckler obviously coming back healthy. I think a lot of people are excited. He's one of my kind of buy low type off running backs right now, especially in startup drafts. If you're in Scott Fish, I feel like he's falling a little bit, so check it, at least in the mock drafts at the moment. But what should we expect from Austin Eckler here? Like Ryan had mentioned, Joe Lombardi's coming in, obviously coming over from the Saints, and obviously we know how they like to use Alvin Kamara, and I feel like Alvin Kamara and Austin Eckler have a similar skill set. So what should we expect, guys? Do we think Austin Eckler can be like a top 10 running back this season for fantasy? Or do we think he's going to be a high-end RB2? Dave?
I mean, I think he's definitely got to be closer to that top 10 running back, and that's just not my favoritism for him joining the show with me a little while back. But I mean, he's a flat-out stud when he's healthy. I think always the question with him is if he's going to be healthy. But if you look in the 8 full games he played with Herbert last year, he had 63 targets, which over a 16-game season would have been 126 targets. Obviously, even more so, it's going to be more with 17 games. I would think outside of Christian McCaffrey, he's probably the best pass-catching back you'll see for fantasy. So maybe 100 targets possibly in the passing game. Obviously, the carries are not going to be 20+, but if he gets anywhere near, 180 to 200 carries, I think you combine that with the passing game volume, and that's an RB1 for sure as far as a top 12 running back. I would have him probably closer into my top 10. And in the Scott Fish Bowl drafts, a lot of times he's there for me when I have the first pick in the Scott Fish Bowl draft, and falls right into my lap when it gets back to me at the first pick. So I think he's great value there. He's got that upside. He's got the passing game upside. And I know we'll talk about the guys behind him too, but they're not exactly exciting. So Austin Eckler season, top 10 running back, I think, unless he gets hurt, it's a lock for me.
I like that. I agree. Like I said, he's one of my favorite buys this offseason. Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like David said, guys behind him aren't going to be threatening him for touches anytime soon. When he was healthy last year, he saw around 19 touches a game. So I expect it to stay roughly the same. In his 9 full games last year, he averaged 18 PDR points per game, which would have been RB4 had he stayed healthy all year. And his floor just stays super high because of his pass catching ability. Like David said, 63 targets in just 10 games or something like that. I mean, he's debatably their best playmaking weapon outside of Keenan Allen, and some people might even have him ahead of Keenan Allen because he's a running back, so he has more options to get the ball in his hands than Keenan Allen does. So I think Joe Lombardi's a smart enough offensive coordinator and a smart enough smart enough play caller to get Austin Eckler the ball and try to utilize him in that Alvin Kamara hybrid role there. So yeah, I think top 10 is certainly what I'm looking at in terms of Eckler. I don't think he finishes below that at all.
Yeah, and I think one upside for him too is what David mentioned earlier, which we'll get to, but is the downgrade from Hunter Henry. I think, yeah, Jared Cook is still serviceable, but I think as an offensive coordinator, I'm going to want to get Austin Eckler out into that tight end type range there, in the shorter routes, and almost coach Herbert to be like, get the ball to Eckler over Jared Cook if he can, just purely on the playmaking ability after the catch. So I have big aspirations for Austin Eckler this year. But like you guys had alluded to, how about for the RB2 here in Los Angeles? Do we care about any of them? Do we think anybody breaks off? Do we think it's Justin Jackson? Do we think it's Larry Roundtree? Or is Joshua Kelly going to redeem himself this year? Dave?
It's a mess, honestly. I think Jackson is, yeah, it's like, if you want to categorize it, I think Jackson's kind of in a smaller guy like Eckler. Eckler's more muscle than Justin Jackson, but he's not a goal line back. He's a shifty guy. You have Josh Kelly, who pretty much faded extremely hard after he looked like a great compliment early on in the season, and I'm getting some bust vibes from him. And I mean, Larry Roundtree pretty much is kind of an unknown at this point. I'm not comfortable if I draft Eckler. No, I don't right now at this point have any idea. I can look at their depth chart and see Justin Jackson's the number 2, but I don't feel comfortable in the backup right now.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, I'm waiting. If I'm grabbing any of them, I'm waiting on Larry Roundtree. I feel like I'm the same boat with you with Josh Kelly. I just kind of got distasted. I liked him a lot last year, like coming out, and I thought the situation was great. I thought he would have sort of that role that he had early on. And then, like you'd said, he kind of just faded out and just got beat out by undrafted free agents and guys who are just journeymen. So to me, it just screams, I mean, it is a new coaching staff, so he could have another shot, but I just feel like this coaching staff drafted Larry Roundtree, who's a very similar running back. So it kind of tells me there's some writing on the wall there. How about you, Ryan? Do you feel like either or any of these guys or anybody that you're really trying to target late in drafts?
If you're going to target one, I think as of right now, I think it's Justin Jackson. Roundtree was drafted in the 7th round, so not a whole lot of draft capital into him. And Jackson has just proven to be actually pretty effective when he's healthy. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. When in his 3 games that he was healthy last year with Eckler out, he had almost 300 yards, 13 catches, and almost 17 touches a game. So if he can stay healthy, I think he actually is a decent running back. He just has problems staying on the field. And Josh Kelly I actually thought he was actually better than he was, and I didn't think he was all that great, but he only averaged 3.2 yards per rush last season. So I wanted to like him, and like you had said, Jeremy, I liked him going into last year. I drafted him in my rookie draft last year, but actually in a couple of rookie drafts last year. But as of right now, it just doesn't look good for his prospects in the NFL. But I also don't want to write off a rookie completely after the weird season that everybody had. I feel like COVID really did affect a lot of people in the offseason and not giving those rookies the opportunity to be in training camp and things like that. So I'm not willing to write him off completely, but if I had to choose a guy to handcuff with Eckler, it'd be Jackson for me.
I like it. Let's move on to the wide receiver rooms here. Obviously, we have Keenan Allen, the perennial Pro Bowler, best, I mean, arguably one of the most underrated wide receivers probably for fantasy football. But then he's paired with Mike Williams, who kind of is, I guess you could argue, has been kind of disappointing for a career. What can we expect out of both of these guys this year? Second year with Justin Herbert, Dave?
I definitely think you're going to get an upgrade from what they've had over recent seasons. I'm still not sold for Mike Williams to have more than just those 2 to 3 monster games he has every year. And then you put him in your lineup after those monster games, and then he gives you a dud. So I'm not feeling like he's going to be worth starting maybe outside a flex if you're desperate. And as far as Keenan Allen goes, he saw 147 targets, which was 5th in the league last year. He obviously made that go-to target receiver that you felt like Justin Herbert needed as a rookie, a guy that he can trust down the stretch. He was targeted over 10 times in 10 separate games last year from him. So you know that kind of that target-based floor he's going to get is there as probably at least a wide receiver too. I'm still concerned because he hasn't scored more than 8 touchdowns in any season in his career. And right now, I think he's a borderline top wide receiver 1. I ranked him as wide receiver 13, which is about what he was last year. So again, maybe he scratches the back end, but I would feel more comfortable as a high-end wide receiver 2. Just touchdown-wise, he doesn't seem like he is that guy that is that wide receiver 1 with that lack of touchdown upside. Yeah,
and I wonder if that's something we could see that possibly change this year again with Jared Cook going down from Hunter Henry, who's obviously kind of a red zone target. Do we think Josh Palmer is anything worthy this year, or kind of just like a dynasty type stash type player?
I'd have him as a dynasty stash right now. I don't think he's going to be rosterable in season long this year.
All right, Ryan, how do you feel about Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and then Josh Palmer in 21 or a stash?
So Keenan Allen is obviously the undeniable alpha in that group, and he's been consistent as they come. You know, he's going to get 130 plus targets. He's going to have 90 catches. He's going to have 1,000 yards, and he's going to have at least 6 touchdowns. Like David said, the touchdown thing is kind of weird because touchdowns aren't very predictive, but they have been for him. He's had 6. He had 6 touchdowns in 3 straight years, and then he had a 1-7 touchdown game or 1-7 touchdown season. So like you know what he's going to do in terms of touchdown production, but maybe that does change, like you said, with Hunter Henry now being gone. But with history has shown that that's basically his average. I mean, his last 4 years, he's averaged 148 targets, 100 catches, 1,200 yards, and 7 touchdowns. So that's just what he's done the past 4 years when he's been able to stay on the field. So I agree with Dave. He's a high-end wide receiver 2, and if he does see an uptick in touchdowns, he does have wide receiver 1 upside just because of his target share. As for Mike Williams, I expected him to have a bigger year last year, especially after Herbert took over. I really thought that with Herbert's arm, that he would be able to take advantage of the deep ball, but he actually saw his yards per target drop by a full 2 yards, and his ADOT fell by over 3 yards. So I expect him to still be the outside starter opposite of Keenan Allen, and hopefully to see him capitalize on the deep ball a bit more. He was 14th in unrealized air yards and 15th in yards per reception. So I'd like to see that, see him get a little bit more deep ball targets. And I'd like to see him get a little bit more than 11 red zone targets that he had last year. Lombardi's already came out and said that he's going to line up as an extra receiver in his scheme. And Mike Williams has come out and said that he knows the damage that Michael Thomas did in that role for the Saints. Williams isn't that same player, obviously, but he could see a poor man's version of that production, and he should finish as a wide receiver 3, maybe 4, with wide receiver 2 upside if he can take advantage of that big playability and that big arm that Herbert has.
So I think I could argue that Mike Williams probably might see the touchdown benefit from Cook more than Keenan Allen. Would you guys agree, or say no, just because of the body size? You know what I mean? Like that's kind of like his MO, even though it's like a deep ball, but he's kind of like a 50-50 ball guy more than I would say Keenan Allen is, but
he's 2 years removed from a 10 touchdown season.
Yeah. So
he had 1,000 yards a year prior to last year. So if he can put those 2 together like that, he's a steal right now. I'm not saying he will, but if he can, he's got the potential to do both of those, obviously. So if he can put it all together, then he's right there.
He just is like one of those guys that bothers you for fantasy because I expect so much out of him. Like you've seen it, like you said, like a 10 touchdown season, then you saw the 1,000 yard season, and it's just like leaving you for more. Like, I just want that. Like, yeah, I just want, but yet I want him to be good. I'm like, Mike Williams, it's just like, he's got to be good. And every year I get burned. He feels like Joe Mixon of the wide receivers right now. But
you shut your mouth about Joe
Mixon. But let's move on. Just real quick. I mean, this is probably irrelevant for most, I would say, fantasy. I don't think either of these guys are going to be of any relevance in the tight end position unless you're playing 2 or 3 tight ends. But Jared Cook or Donald Parham, David?
I'm probably, if I have to pick one, I'm just going Cook. As was mentioned before, he's going to play with the offensive coordinator he played with in Joe Lombardi with the Saints. He was the Saints QB coach. He's got a familiarity with the playbook, most likely. So I would give him, and they also are giving him $4.5 million guaranteed on his 1-year deal, which isn't a small amount of money. So I would think that he's going to play. But again, I'm not confident about either of the two.
Fair enough. I can see that. I liked Parham, but then like his lack of usage last year, once he was in the lineup, kind of like deterred me. I know he's kind of probably still a little raw because he's fairly young, but I don't know. I'm just kind of avoiding these tight ends. I don't see them being used a ton. Like I had said, I think outside of being your flex type tight end that you're going to plug in a bye week, I'm really not interested. How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I think they're both pretty much touchdown dependent, regardless of who's in the lineup at this point. But I do like Parham as a dynasty guy just because of his size and athleticism. If he can get on the field and really take a leap. I mean, he's 6'8", 240. So I mean, it's not like he's lacking for size or anything like that. But I think if everyone is healthy, I think Cook is a preferred option. But he's going to finish around the tight end 18, 19, 20. So he's basically just another guy. So I'm outside of Parham and Dynasty, I'm not really interested in throwing a dart at either one of them.
Yeah, I wish he'd put on a little bit more weight though. Like, have you ever seen him? Like, I mean, 6'8", 240 is really not. He's not that big. Like, he's big. No, he's tall, but like he's very, very scrawny for like a tight end. You know what I mean? Like his build, just because of how tall he is, like the weight isn't really. It sounds like a lot, like 240. You're like, oh, he's a decent size, but you see him and it's just, I don't know. I feel like he's going to be one of those guys that has all this potential with the size and like his background, but like never reaches it. That's my personal opinion. I feel like I liked him a couple of years ago. Like I stashed him like last year at the early onset, and then kind of like watching him during the games, I'm just kind of like, I don't know. He kind of moves a little lumbery, and it just doesn't seem like, I don't know. I'm not totally sold on him being a stash. I dropped him in a couple spots just because there's other guys this year that I like better, not necessarily at the tight end position, but other rookies or say second-year guys that I think that have a better chance. Let's move on to the Las Vegas Raiders here. Derek Carr, I will beat this drum till like the day I die as far as fantasy goes with Derek Carr. I feel like he's very undervalued quarterback. I mean, he's not flashy. He's not going to get you that QB1 numbers any day, but he's just Mr. Reliable for me. I think he's a great QB2. How do you guys feel about Derek Carr, Dave?
I mean, he was QB 13 last year, and it didn't even feel like he had a good season. So I feel like he's definitely got to be a top 15 QB. He's over the last 2 years under Gruden, he's played 32 games, and he's had a QB1 performances 14 times. Again, I think, like you said, he's a great QB2. I think if you're thinking he's going to be like a top 10 quarterback, those days from look like early in his career are long gone. But yeah, as QB2 goes, he's steady. And, you know, in this offense with Gruden, seems like he's improving each year. Yeah, top, 15 quarterback. I'll take that as a QB2 for sure.
Sometimes I just feel like, is it a wide receiver problem? You know what I mean? Like he has a tendency to sometimes hold the ball a little bit much. So like, it's not completely their fault, but like sometimes I just feel like after they lost Amari Cooper, like the receivers that they've had haven't been like really helping him all that much. I think they're kind of getting there with these guys that they have now, but I just feel like I wish I would see like Derek Carr with like a better receiver group just to see what he could do. I feel like we kind of did when they had Amari Cooper, but I just feel like you had said, I think he's just a QB2. Ryan, do you think anything outside of that, or are you even more of a Derek Carr truther than I am?
No, I think he's definitely a QB2, but if you look at the last 4 weeks that he was healthy, so the last 4 weeks of the season, but not including week 15 because he got hurt in week 15. Those 4 weeks to end the year, he averaged 351 yards and had 3 rushing touchdowns. So when he got a little bit more comfortable, and I feel like he wasn't completely comfortable with his wide receiving core. Like I said, I think the offseason really hurt them because he had Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs as his 2 main targets, and even because Edwards was actually the starter over Aguilar before he had gotten hurt. So once he got acclimated with his receivers and the offense, I feel like he showed that he can be a high-end quarterback. I just don't think he's consistent enough to do that all year. But the fact that he averaged 351 over the last 4 weeks that he was healthy shows his upside that he does have. In addition to Kenyon Drake and hopefully the development of guys like Ruggs and Edwards, he definitely should be in the QB. He will be a QB2, and he'll have his weeks as a QB1. The hard part is going to be guessing which weeks it's going to be. So he's going to be just in that QB 15 range for me, and just kind of a matchup play.
All right, so I think we can all agree that we like Derek Carr.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the running back room, and this is just a head scratcher. Not that the Raiders don't make head scratching moves, but they bring in Kenyon Drake and they pay him decent money after they already roster a 23-year-old running back who, when given the opportunity, has proven that he can basically do everything that they need him to do. Josh Jacobs last year in the 17 weeks finishing total, so I'm using that, basing it kind of like off of the 18-week season this year, but he was RB8, 12 points per game around. Kenyon Drake was running back 11 per, obviously playing on 2 different teams at the time. Dave, is there one that you want more, or do they both kind of just kill each other and offset? Like, I know we're not going to know what this looks like. Like, is Drake a passing back? Is he going to get used 50-50, like alternate series, something? Like, we don't know what we're going to get yet, but who's the guy that you want this year? And obviously probably dynasty as well.
You're muted.
Dave, you're muted.
That rookie mistake.
That's all right.
So I'm Josh Jacobs for both. Obviously last year, he was a borderline first round pick, which if you play any type of PPR league, you know that he has no pass catching upside, and which hurts him in those formats a lot. And right now his value is dipping so low that I think it's worth it where he's going. Right now a lot of people are saying he's been going in the 5th round. So if you can get him in the 5th round, I think that's decent value for him. Not saying that it's like, oh, watch him produce RB1 type numbers, but he was RB8 last year. I would expect that to downturn a little bit. With the addition of Kenyon Drake, I could definitely see being frustrating. Kenyon Drake takes the series. Then, Josh Jacobs takes a series. Kenyon Drake hops in. Josh Jacobs has a long run, and Kenyon Drake comes in from the 5 when he's getting a breather. I could see all that stuff being extremely frustrating. I can't say unless, again, if he goes in the 5th or 6th round, I'll probably snag Jacobs there. But around, where at least he's right now, I think he's like RB12. I don't know if I'm taking him that high, and I'm not feeling too sorry for myself if I don't get him at that price.
I like that. I think that's a good way to look at it. Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, so overall, Vegas running backs saw a drop in yards per rush, yards per catch, and catch rate last season. Injuries and inconsistent line play did play a factor, but we saw Josh Jacobs take a step back after everyone was banking on him having a huge year. He had almost a full yard less per run and a full yard less per catch as opposed to 2019, and he only had 3 runs over 20 yards. So you weren't seeing those explosive runs that you had been seeing, and you were kind of banking on him having. And he only had 2 games over 100 yards and saw his touches drop off quite a bit after week 13. He averaged 18 touches per game from then on and had 346 total yards and 3 touchdowns to go along with only 6 catches. So the addition of Drake implies that they won't be targeting him much more like they promised they were last season. And I think Drake will likely be a change of pace back while also occasionally playing out of the slot. He had 103 catches for 822 yards and 5 touchdowns in previous 2 seasons prior to last year. I think I'd rather have Jacobs regardless of format because of his volume, but I think Drake is a high-end handcuff and should be flex viable, especially as a bye week fill-in.
All right. I mean, I hate when this happens. Like, I hate the messy running back rooms. Like, I feel like it's going to be the way of the future. You see a lot of teams going this route, using two specifically skill-setted guys for each skill. But I'm avoiding them personally. I see the talent. I mean, Jacobs has proven it, and obviously being a first-round pick, I just don't know what this room's going to look like. Like David said, maybe in the 5th round. There's receivers I like better in the 5th round. So for me, I'm passing on Jacobs and Drake. I would actually probably take Drake over Jacobs just because of the point where they're getting drafted, because Jacobs is still going in the 5th round, which is good value if you get the return of like a high-end RB2, but I just don't know if that's going to be there for me. So, like, for me, I'm looking at it as a value standpoint. I'm taking Kenyon Drake because I think he has just as equal of an opportunity to outproduce Jacobs, especially because most leagues I play in PPR. So, but either way, I feel like they're going to be close enough that I might wait. And I feel like I can get Kenyon Drake probably. I don't know exactly where his DLF or his like ADP is at the moment, but I feel like he's going to be probably closer to the round 10, where I feel a little bit more comfortable taking one of these guys who it could be a coin flip this year at this moment that we don't know. You know what I mean? It could be a coin flip. It could be Kenyon Drake could be the starter. Maybe they really just hate Josh Jacobs that much. I mean, you've seen him bring in multiple running backs since he's been there. So that's the way that I look at it. I think Jacobs probably is the lead back, but I just feel like the value for Drake is a little bit better where they're getting drafted at the moment. Let's move on to like another really messy situation. The wide receiver room. We obviously have Bryan Edwards was a rookie last year. He's going to be in his 2nd season, hopefully healthy. Henry Ruggs is there. They added John Brown. Those are probably the top 3, I think, for me. I'm not sure if anybody disagrees with that. But do we think any of these guys are any relevance for us outside of flex plays, Dave?
I mean, you would like to say Henry Ruggs, right? I mean, you would hope he was the first receiver drafted in a absolutely stacked class. You know, maybe another year to build a rapport with Derek Carr. But I mean, to be honest, it's Darren Waller gets such a high target share in this offense. Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake obviously are going to be big parts of the run game. And then Kenyon Drake you'd expect to be, used in the passing game. Henry Ruggs last year just kind of showed you on some plays. He was pretty much, I think he had one game for like 120 something yards and a touchdown. Like, I would like to say he gets a little bit better than just the boomer bust guy, but he also doesn't have the type of quarterback that's incredible with the deep ball to make him maximize his talents. So maybe they use more quick slants. Maybe they do more jet sweeps. Maybe they get the ball in his hands a lot more. But I'm not like sitting here jumping for joy being like Henry Ruggs breakout year 2. I don't feel that type of vibe right now. Maybe I'll be wrong and maybe I'll be too late on it. But right now I'm not drafting him that way and trying to get him where he's going.
Fair. I mean, I'm pretty much out. Again, this is a value standpoint for me. I like Bryan Edwards. I liked him coming out. So he's the guy I'm trying to add just because he's going so late right now. And I just, like you had said, I feel like Ruggs doesn't fit the offense and it doesn't really fit Derek Carr. I feel like he could get used in a different way where he'd be effective. I'm not saying that he can't be, but I just feel like the way they use him is kind of like a field stretcher / their Tyreek Hill version. And sometimes Derek Carr doesn't have the arm. You can see Ruggs get by guys and he has to wait on a ball. But like you'd said, I mean, he could take a step forward. Obviously, last year was crazy. We looked at a stacked wide receiver class and we had people producing like Justin Jefferson or even Jerry Jeudy had a decent year. I mean, CeeDee Lamb had a good year. Like, a lot of these guys overproduce what normal rookie wide receivers do. So I feel like Henry Ruggs was kind of in a normal wide receiver rookie like production like projection. So I feel like he didn't have a bad year. It's just everybody else in his class had an even better year. So I'm not ready to give up on him, but I'm just not sold on Ruggs. I didn't like him much last year. Ryan, how about you? Do you feel like any of these guys are going to be a relevance for you outside of flex plays?
Man, it's tough because like I spoke on before, I mean, them both being rookies, not having that off season to really get acclimated with the offense was tough on them. I know Edwards had issues with injuries and COVID and things like that, but the wide receivers as a whole only saw a 42% target share last year, and we're actually outscored by Devontae Adams in PPR scoring, and he only played in 14 games. So if you're looking at it from that aspect, like, no, you're not really interested in these guys as anything more than a flex play. But for Ruggs, if they would give him more than 5 targets a game and give him some more short area work for him to use his open field ability, I'd actually say he's probably in that wide receiver 3 discussion, but you just don't know what they're going to do with him. You just don't know. And Edwards only had 15 targets all year, but he has the body and the run running ability to be a solid receiver in the NFL. And he showed in college that he was good in contested catch situations. So it's just one of those things where if you look at what they did last year, then no, you're not really interested in anybody outside of Ruggs on a dart throw that he breaks a big play or something like that. But Tim Brown did come out and say that he has a lot of confidence in Edwards and saying that he's the one to look out for, and he should be a major cog in that offense. And that's a quote from Tim Brown saying that he will be a major cog in that offense. So if that's true, I don't know how much. I'm sure Tim Brown does have a nose into the idea of what they want to do with that offense because of just how great he was with the Raiders. But it's the off season. It's just like coach speak where they say one thing and you just never really know if it's going to come true. So I'm not really interested in drafting any of them at their current ADP just because it's just a bunch of unknowns for me, and the offense just runs through Darren Waller too much.
Man, if it's Bryan Edwards like you're saying, man, I'm going to be a happy man. Let's move on to Darren Waller, though, guys. Can Darren Waller finish tight end 1 this year? Where we've obviously alluded to talking about the wide receivers. He does carry a large target share in this offense. What do we think, Dave? Tight end 1 possibilities, or is he just cemented kind of as the 2 to 3 behind Kelsey?
He's always going to be number 2 as long as Kelsey's playing at the level he's playing. And if you look at you mentioned the target share. The Raiders had a 33% target share to tight ends. The next closest is Philly at 30%. Can't go anywhere but down if you're the top team throwing to the tight end. So, again, the highest target share. You also have, I think you're trying to get the other guys more involved. Obviously, teams can start doubling Darren Waller more. They don't have a Tyreek Hill like the Chiefs have, where that can take away some from Kelsey. It's Kelsey. Waller at best will be number 2, in my opinion.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm pretty sure 90% of the people will probably agree with you, and I'm agreeing with you as well. I don't think he gets there. Ryan?
No, I agree. I don't think he's going to be. I don't think he can reach tight end 1 without injuries or a talent drop off from Kelsey and probably even Kittle. Like I said, I expect the Raiders to use Ruggs and Edwards more while also getting Drake involved, and Jacobs still getting a small piece of the receiving pie. So he might have seen his highest target share he's ever going to see in his career last season. He had a higher target share than Kelsey, Keenan Allen, and Allen Robinson, and he would have been the wide receiver 8 in PPR scoring. So he's an amazing talent, but I do expect an increase in production from Ruggs and Edwards while also expecting Drake to factor in. So I just can't see a path for him to be the tight end 1.
Fair enough. Let's move on to the Denver Broncos, guys. The Broncos, I think the biggest question for me out of this is it going to be Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock? Dave, start us off.
Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, without too much analysis, seen how bad that Lock has looked in camp when he hasn't been hurt. Bridgewater's impressing, and it's not hard to be better than Drew Lock at this point. I'll be shocked, like genuinely shocked, if Bridgewater is not the week 1 starter.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think they obviously went out and made the deal to bring him in. And like you had said, you see the camp reports and everything, and Lock struggling again, throwing more and more interceptions. And I just feel like Bridgewater's always kind of been smart with the ball, and he takes care of it. And I think that's what Denver wants. I think they want that. And I think that they went out and got him for a reason. I mean, obviously it was more competition to see if maybe Drew Lock could step it up, but I just don't see it. I think Drew Lock is set and destined to be a backup for the rest of his career. I think Teddy Bridgewater is your week 1 starter, like you had said. Ryan, how about you?
No, I agree. I think he's a starter, but honestly, I mean, any conversation with them could be irrelevant tomorrow because they could trade for Rodgers or Watson, like has been rumored since the offseason started. So I do think it's Bridgewater. He's clearly an upgrade in terms of his accuracy and just his ability to actually throw his receivers the ball properly. So I do expect him to be the week 1 starter. And all reports out of camp are that Drew Lock has not looked any better. He hasn't really progressed any. And like David said, Bridgewater's actually looked really good in camp so far. So I expect it to be him.
I like it. Let's move on to another big question. There's been some rumors out there for something that is near and dear to my heart, and I would be extremely joyed. But Javonte Williams or Melvin Gordon, week 1 running back starter. Dave?
I have Javonte Williams based off the reports that you've been seeing. Melvin Gordon, I think, was obviously going to be a top handcuff to have there, but I loved Javonte Williams. And again, I know you're, Jeremy, I'll give you that you definitely probably watch a lot more college ball than I do. But just from studying it a lot more the last couple of months leading up to the draft, I fell in love with his game, led FBS in broken tackles, start of being the starter week 1 already, like I said, mentioned. And Melvin Gordon didn't exactly light the world on fire last year. He was efficient, but it's not like he was a game-breaking guy. Javonte Williams, I think I would expect if he's not the week 1 starter, I could see it being very easily by like week 2 where it's like they're splitting carries and then week 3 he's getting the start. So I'm drafting Javonte Williams as if he's going to be the starter, if not week 1, within the first 2 or 3 games.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with that. I think Javonte, and like you'd said, I mean, I like Javonte Williams from as long as you can go back. I think I deemed him as my RB1, and a lot of people don't like me for that probably. But I just think that his age, especially in Dynasty, at least his age, and I think he's very much on par with Najee Harris. And I think overall he might be a touch better. I just think that he doesn't have that game-breaking speed, but I feel like he might go in, and like we had said, we saw the reports. I feel like he's definitely at least like the early down back, and they might use Gordon as like a pass protector. But Javonte Williams is a very good pass protecting back, especially if you watch some of his tape. I mean, he used to be a linebacker, so he's not afraid of contact, and that's proven with the broken tackles metric that you had mentioned there, Dave. But I feel like even if so, Williams has proven on a 50-50 split that he's a very productive back. So I like both of them. And especially depending on how much Gordon falls, he's a good way. If you're in a dynasty startup, you can possibly get both. And I like that just because we don't really know what they're going to get. But I do think Javonte Williams definitely before the end of the season is the starter there. If it's week 1, like I'm just going to be overjoyed. So I'm just going to say that. Ryan, go ahead. I'll stop crushing now.
No, I agree. I think Javonte is I think he's the guy that starts the most games. I'll just say that. I don't know if he's going to be the week 1 starter, but I think he does start the most games. And you're going to want him because Melvin averaged 16 touches per game last season, but he was 85th in terms of fantasy points per opportunity according to Player Profiler. And they traded up 5 spots to get Javonte. I think they gave up like 2 or 3 picks to move up and get him. Williams has shown up in OTAs and has looked really good. Gordon never showed up during OTAs, but did show up for mandatory minicamp. And he's entering the final year of his contract, so he does have something to play for. But nobody's mentioned the fact that Gordon also does have that DUI from last year that he could still see some sort of discipline from the league, even though he did take a lesser charge. He pled guilty to a lesser charge. And Vic Fangio has come out and said that he has a lot of confidence in Williams and stated that he is, and this is quote, capable in all downs and distances in all situations. So I think Williams is a better player. He's younger, and I think he takes the majority of the work at some point in the season and finishes as an RB2 this year. And after this year, the backfield will be completely his.
No one even mentioned that he picked the sweetest number of all the rookie running backs. I mean, 33. I mean, let's be real. Looks pretty. It looks great in Broncos orange. I'm just saying. But either way, what?
Who had somebody had a number similar to that last year.
I don't know. That's his last
Royce Freeman wears 30, doesn't he?
Who?
Doesn't Royce Freeman wear 30?
Something like that. I don't know. You're thinking of Terrell Davis because they're similar, Terrell Davis and Javonte Williams. They're,
I mean, I'd be very happy with that outcome.
Yeah, we're bold. I said Nico Collins is like Michael Thomas, so I'll just say that too. Why not? Anyways, let's move on to the wide receiver room, who is going to get a big upgrade this year based off of injury. Cortland Sutton returns, and then obviously last year's first-round pick and Jerry Jeudy is there, and then also KJ Hamler, who proved to be fairly good out of the slot last year. How do you guys have these, or how do you have them finishing, Dave? Who is the top receiver of these three, which it's obviously probably either of the two with Jeudy and Sutton?
I may be against how people feel, but I actually have Jerry Jeudy ahead of Cortland Sutton. And I know there are a lot of Sutton lovers out there, and some people that rank him really, really high. But I'm going to be taking Jeudy over him every time as long as Teddy Bridgewater is the quarterback there. It was, again, if you go, and not every camp report you should listen to, but I definitely do take notice when I hear that a quarterback and a receiver have been working well together. And that was a report that came out of Denver. Jerry Jeudy fits the exact type of game that Bridgewater likes. Bridgewater doesn't have a big arm. Bridgewater likes these short intermediate routes, and Judy's going to beat that coverage every single time, especially with Cortland Sutton back, probably getting the number one. I would expect Jeudy to go into the slot, easily be able to get open. The problem was drops, and I expect he'll be better than that, or he'll be better in that in the second year. Again, if Bridgewater's the quarterback there, they have a rapport. Judy's a great route runner. To me, it's very easily Jeudy. Obviously, Sutton, I think, will have some value. And I will mention KJ Hamler, though. We had Jacoby Ford, the former Raiders speedster. He was one of the first guests we had last year. And he works out with KJ Hamler, and he said that he's going to be really special. And he said to keep an eye on him. He said maybe not in year one, but he said this kid works extremely hard, and he's going to make his name felt in the league. So I don't know if that's going to be this year or not, but it definitely seems like KJ Hamler is definitely on the upswing as well.
Yeah, I mean, from the limited stuff we saw from him, I liked KJ Hamler last year. So if you're going to say that Jeudy slides to the slot, do we think Tim Patrick plays the other outside, or do you know what I'm saying? Like, I know you'd mentioned possibly sliding into the slot.
I think they'll go in and out. Like, I think Jeudy could definitely play some of the outside, and then Hamler will be in the slot. And then I think they could Tim Patrick was pretty decent last year. Yeah. So I could easily see them having Patrick on the outside as well and Jeudy sliding in. I think they'll move him around a lot. I think he'll play a little bit more outside than I think they'll play CeeDee Lamb for Dallas this year. But I do think he'll play a little bit everywhere. And I expect a great year with him. I mean, Bridgewater has shown, even though he's not a flashy quarterback, he's shown he can produce decent wide receivers, as he showed in Carolina last year. So I definitely like Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, and I agree. I would feel like Jerry Judy's a little bit more like that DJ Moore mold. So I could see that. And Cortland Sutton could kind of be Robbie Anderson style. He's a little bit of a deeper threat than. So I could see that. I like that. I mean, it's definitely, I'm a Cortland Sutton guy. I think Cortland Sutton's just going to see the better target share. But your argument is definitely valid there, where Jerry Jeudy seems to fit the Bridgewater mold a little better. So I can definitely see that route. I think they'll be close. You know what I mean? I think it's going to be really close. And I think they're both like fringe wide receiver twos. That's my personal opinion. I don't think either of these guys are going to jump into the top 15. But I do think that they'll be serviceable, both of them. Ryan, how about you?
No, I'm actually really happy that Dave said Jerry Jeudy, because that's exactly who I have with Teddy Bridgewater being the quarterback. And I've seen a lot of things on Twitter and fantasy Facebook, which is garbage, by the way. I'm just going to throw that out right now.
It's a bold claim.
It's garbage. But Jerry Jeudy was far and away the most unlucky receiver in the entire league last year. If you really dive deep into his stats, his unluckiness, I guess you could say, it was just unreal. He had the most uncatchable targets in the league last year with 26, led the league in deep ball targets that were deemed uncatchable with 10, and he was tied for second with uncatchable end zone targets with 5, and he was third in the league in uncatchable targets when deemed wide open or open according to PFF. So the drops were an issue, but Drew Lock did him absolutely no favors in any way, shape, or form. If Teddy Bridgewater is able to be even a 5% better passer in terms of accuracy to Jeudy, then he'll have a major breakout year. I've seen people saying that Jeudy was a bust last year and he had all these drops and blah, 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 which he was second in the league behind Deontay in drops, and I get that, but that's something that can be worked on in the offseason. He'll be on the jug machine all offseason working on that. And that rapport with Teddy Bridgewater will help with that, because I don't think him and Drew Lock ever really got that rapport that they really needed to make them be effective. So I love Jerry Jeudy this year. I'm trying to get him wherever I possibly can. And I think with Sutton there, though, I think they're both, like you said, wide receiver 2s, maybe even high end wide receiver 3s with the target share issue there. But if Teddy Bridgewater can prove to be effective, I definitely think they have wide receiver 2, maybe even high end wide receiver 2 upside.
Isn't it crazy to think real quick? This is just a quick off tangent, but like, if you're making that stat there, like a lot of people like Deontay Johnson a lot, but then don't like Jerry Jeudy, but yet they kind of seem like the same guy. You know what I mean? Like if you're arguing, like Deontay Johnson's kind of like a coveted guy in fantasy football, and yet he drops the ball obviously a lot last year. He did, and yet he's tied to like a very old, aging Ben Roethlisberger with 2 other very good wide receivers.
And that's the thing.
Like you look at rankings, and he's so much higher than Jerry Jeudy, who's clearly could be the top guy on his team with a younger, arguably, possibly more accurate quarterback at the moment. Maybe you could argue, or at least a little bit stronger arm. You could argue for sure than Roethlisberger with Bridgewater. I just think it's interesting. That's all.
Yeah,
no, I think that's a really good comparison, actually. And yeah, if you're into, I mean, they're going to be target hogs and they're going to be very efficient. And I'm happy to take them as wide receiver 2s all day.
I do want to throw out there that Sutton is in a contract year, so go and stash Seth Williams as a possible Sutton replacement.
I don't think Seth Williams is going to be anything. I liked him, but I just don't.
I'm saying as a possible replacement for Sutton. If they don't add anybody else, he would be next in line with Tim Patrick being on the outside with him.
I feel like he's a guy you could add. If you're talking about a stash, I would probably wait. I feel like he's going to sit on on every team, like or most leagues, like waiver wire, and then like you could add him once you're out of the playoffs.
If you do that though, and he does get named the starter next year, then you take the chance of being too late. I'm just saying if you have the spot, just a name to consider for next year. Nothing this year. He's not going to do anything this year. Possibly next year.
Fair enough. Let's talk about the tight end. I think everybody was pretty amped about Noah Fant last year. He kind of underperformed, also had some injuries. How do we feel about Noah Fant, guys? Do we think he can get to the top 5, or do we just not see the passing volume here with obviously the guys we had just mentioned and possibly maybe a little bit more run-heavy offense? Dave?
I think what you kind of touched on it, and like, I just don't see him getting ahead of the 4 guys or the 5 guys I have ahead of him. Obviously, not to be too chalky, some type of way of Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, and I think Kyle Pitts is obviously now with Julio gone, going to have the volume to definitely get into that top 5, and then T.J. Hawkinson or Mark Andrews. I just Noah Fant there. Looks like potentially the number 3 in this offense. We talked about the 2 pass catchers ahead of him at the wide receiver position. They're going to run the ball a lot. Denver is not a team that airs it out. Bridgewater's not the type of quarterback that's going to air it out a bunch. I think Fant will definitely be serviceable, but I can't put him top 5.
Definitely top 12, though, probably, right?
Oh, yeah, of
probably
course.
Top. I'd say he's probably just outside that top 5. I agree with you. I think he's going to be fighting with. I think he's going to fight with Pitts. I think Hawkinson kind of has 4 locked up just purely on a target volume share. I feel like he's going to have so much there. And I think Kyle Pitts gets a decent amount. I just feel like I don't know how much they're going to give him or if it's going to be more of a committee behind Ridley. But yeah, I think he's going to be right there fighting with Pitts and Andrews and Hawkinson. Last year, the tight end, I think Ryan probably has this stat because he loves his stats. But I feel like 5 through 7 was split by like very few amount of points. So I will let you talk about it, Ryan. And you probably don't have that stat because I'm like alluding to that. But how do you feel about Noah Fant? Do you think he can get top 5 or no?
No, I don't think he can. he started off the year really hot. He had 21 targets in his first 3 games, 14 catches, 184 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But the rest of the way, he only had 3 games that were double-digit PPR points. It was encouraging to see him have 10 games with at least 6 targets, and he saw a considerable jump in targets from 66 to 93, but all that is without Cortland Sutton. So I think what you're hoping for is more consistency, a better catch percentage, and hopefully enough taking touchdowns, because he's only caught 3 in each of his first 2 seasons. So with Sutton being back and assuming he stays healthy, I don't think he sees much more of a target share than he was getting in 2019 when he was getting just a touch over 4 a game. Over 17 games, it would have been 68 targets. So maybe he sees closer to 5 targets a game and gets to that 75, 85 target range, which would still likely get him into that. It still keeps him in that 8 to 12 range, especially if he can increase his touchdown production. He can get up into that top 6, but we all know that touchdowns are volatile and really hard to predict from week to week. So it's hard for me to put him in the top 5 personally.
Fair. I think we can all say we're out on him as a top 5. Let's move on to the Kansas City Chiefs. I feel like this is probably like the least we can talk about everybody as far as like how many question marks we have. I just feel like we'll start with Patrick Mahomes. Do we think he's still the QB1? Obviously, Josh Allen and Kyler Murray kind of pushed him this year. Do we think both of those guys are right there again this year, or do we think Mahomes just kind of still stays as that top QB option? Dave?
If you have Mahomes as QB1, I can't fault you. I have him at QB2. Another time I'll go into who my QB1 is, but obviously Mahomes is uber talented and he's going to throw a lot. He's going to be involved in a lot of high scoring games. So, QB1 is definitely the favorite, obviously the favorite to be a QB1. He rushes enough to be a QB1. Usually it's kind of now been set around 200 rushing yards to at least have a chance to be the QB1. So he can definitely do that, and he'll get some rushing touchdowns. So I don't think I've seen anybody that's had him lower than 2. So QB1 definitely probably the most likely outcome, but for me, he's my QB2.
Fair enough. Just quick, you don't have to give us an analysis. Who's won?
I have Russell Wilson won, actually.
Fair. That's really spicy, but I can see the path, so I like it. Ryan, how about you? Patrick Mahomes, QB1, or is anybody else pushing him for you?
I think he's the QB1 for me for the foreseeable future, barring any sort of injury. He's in the explosive offense. He's got speed and playmakers at every level. He actually could have been even better last year, but he had the 7th most drops in the league. So for me, he's the QB1. Jeremy, me and you are Bills fans. We talked about Josh Allen, and you mentioned Kyler Murray. But I think me and you both agree that Josh Allen possibly takes a step back this coming season. So I'm not sure that he pushes him as hard. I'm not saying he can't, and I'm not saying that it's out of the realm of possibility that he does, but I just don't see him repeating what he did last year fully. But I expect the Kansas City offense to not really change much, because if it's not broke, don't fix it. And they upgraded the offensive line like crazy, so he won't be running for 200 yards behind the line of scrimmage anymore. So it's hard for me to move him off of 1 just because of that, all the weapons and speed and the play calling that he has to work with over there.
Yeah, and I like all the points you're making, and both of you guys. I agree. I think I don't agree with Dave having Russell Wilson there. I agree that Mahomes is probably 1. I think, like you had mentioned, you had alluded to Josh Allen, who pushed him last year. I think we saw Allen's ceiling as a fantasy quarterback possibly last year, at least for like the foreseeable future. If he repeats again this year, then maybe I'm wrong. I just think that what the Bills want to do, I think Josh Allen might see is just like a downtick in total, like say rushing touchdowns. I think they want to get Moss involved a little bit there, and that's going to bring him down. And I just think that I'm not sold on Kyler Murray as a full-time, like very great, super, super elite passer in the NFL. So I just feel like I think Mahomes had like a down year almost. So like, I feel like he could be even better than what he was last year. So I still think he's just the QB1. I think he's just on his own tier. And then these other guys are kind of close, but they're in a different tier. Let's move on to the running back situation. We saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire come in and everybody was pretty amped. He drove up rookie boards last year, ended up finishing RB19, about 10 points per game in 16 games. So what do we have to expect from Clyde? Is there a big bounce back this year, Dave?
Big bounce back.
Big.
Like Clyde is. I've been doing my guy threads on Twitter for the last 3 weeks. He was the one I did 2 weeks ago. And so I wrote up him a little bit. And this is just basically an easier way to digest instead of article form. But we talked about first the fact that any rookie last year was going into a tough situation with a COVID-filled season, little time to work with your teammates, adjust to the playbook. All of season programs are different. He still had 1,100 yards, which isn't a bad 1,100 yards from scrimmage, which actually was 14th among running backs, which isn't a bad rookie season to have. But I think when people look at CH, they look at a lot of things. So I kind of wanted to just take an outside look at it. So we first look at the Chiefs O-line, who according to ESPN Analytics Index, the Chiefs had a 67% O-line run blocking win rate, the 31st in the NFL. The patchwork offensive line also lost Pro Bowl tackle Mitchell Schwartz in week 6. And they were destroyed by offensive line injuries all season. You obviously saw in the Super Bowl how bad it was, especially losing Eric Fisher there, that they just couldn't give Mahomes 2 seconds to throw. So if you have offensive lines like that, I don't know how you expect any running back to succeed in the run game. But then come 2021, the Chiefs add Orlando Brown, Joe Thuney, who's been guarded as one of the best guards in the NFL, Kyle Long, who did hurt his leg, but he's expected to be back week 1. Drafted center Creed Humphrey from Oklahoma. They have veteran Austin Blythe, who was the starting center for the Rams. And you also have guard Laurent Duvernay-Tardif and Lucas Niang, who missed last year because they sat out because of COVID. Laurent Duvernay-Tardif is a Pro Bowl caliber lineman. So you have a whole new offensive line. I think it's like a total of 8 new offensive linemen on that team. But then let's go back to CEH, who according to PFF, even with that bad offensive line that he had to work with, he was a rushing grade of 76.8, which was 18th among 47 running backs qualified. And he also had 0.19 missed tackles forced per attempt, which was tied for 14th. And he had 0 fumbles on 217 touches. And I think the thing that people most think of with CEH, hey, he couldn't convert when he got in close, right? He only converted 2 out of 10 attempts from inside the 5. But if you look at the rest of the team, the other running backs combined to go 1 out of 6. So when you look at that, that's more of an offensive line problem than a CEH problem, especially if there's no hole there. Andy Reid, you look at his history of running backs. If in the 22 years of coaching, he's only had a running back fail to be in at least an RB2, so top 24 in PPR scoring only twice. So CEH was the RB21 last year. So I would expect that to be his floor, and I expect that to take that to another level this season. And then the last point I'll make is that if you look at how he was before Le'Veon Bell joined the team, CEH averaged 17.8 carries, 5.2 targets, and 110 yards per game the first 6 weeks of the season. Once Bell got there, that dipped to 10.6 carries, 3.3 targets, and 57.8 yards per game. And if you take those 6 weeks of the season, the only running backs that had more touches than him were Joe Mixon, Zeke, and Derrick Henry. So they added Elijah McGuire and Jerick McKinnon. Those were the only 2 additions to the running back room. This is CEH's year. This is it. I expect him to be able to have the usage he had week 6, and he's going to be more involved in the passing game. The Chiefs threw it the 7th most last year. I think they're going to run it a little bit more as they try to protect Mahomes. I'm all in on CEH. I'm worried his value is going to keep shooting up as it's already gone up since the season ended. But I'm snagging him anytime I can get him on the back end of the 2nd or early 3rd round as much as I can.
Yeah, hold on. I just got to go send some trades real quick. You should be a lawyer if you're not. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you summed that up. Ryan, you have anything to add? I think we found CEH. I think Dave hammered that one. So.
Yeah, I love all that. Like he alluded to, 1,100 yards from scrimmage in only 13 games last year. Lack of touchdowns were somewhat concerning, but like you said, that offensive line was not good. He did see 32 red zone touches, so I expect his touchdowns to increase with a better offensive line and being healthier overall. And just to kind of push home your stat about the run blocking success rate, they were last in the NFL according to Ron Kopp from SB Nation in power success rate. So the offensive line just did not do him any favors. They're projected to have the highest win total again this season. So they're going to have positive game scripts for most of their games, and I expect them to lean on CH more after having a full season to really learn Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy's system that is notoriously complex, especially for rookies. And I think he honestly could put his name into the top 12 RB1 discussion.
Yeah, with the way that Dave has that, I'm going to be going selling my J.K. Dobbins shares for him, and we all know how I like J.K. Dobbins. So
hey, Dobbins' ceiling's capped. CH probably isn't as capped nearly as much as Dobbins is.
I could probably agree with that, unfortunately. Well, let's move on to the wide receiver room, or should I say the wide receiver? For me, it's Tyreek Hill, and then not really anybody who interests me. So, Dave, I'll let you start it off. Is there anybody outside of Tyreek Hill, or is it just Tyreek Hill and then a bunch of guys who catch balls from Mahomes?
I will say this, keep this name in mind, Byron Pringle. He joined the Chiefs in 2018 as an undrafted rookie, and he's in limited time. He barely plays. He's actually became basically our kick returner, permanent kick returner towards the end of last year, and actually got a kick return touchdown. He had 25 catches, 330 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the limited time he's played in 2 seasons, 13.2 yards per catch. But the key thing here that makes me think he's actually going to be relevant this year is the Chiefs used their restricted free agent tender on him and are paying him the $2.1 million of the tender, which isn't a ton of money. But the fact that they used their restricted free agent tender on him for a guy that's been barely playing, I do think he's going to step in to become a lot more relevant this year. And I do follow him on Instagram. I see the type of work he's putting in. Patrick Mahomes talks about him a lot, actually. So I think, again, is he going to be somebody that you're like, oh, he's going to be a league winner? I don't know if I'd go that far, but I do think he's going to be serviceable, and he's going to be a name that you're going to recognize in the Chiefs passing game this year.
I like that. I feel like it's open, and I think that why can't it be Byron Pringle? So I like that, and by the sounds of it, you got that on wrap. So, Ryan, how about you? Is it anybody outside of Tyreek Hill?
I don't know. I think what I'm doing with these guys is I'm kind of just throwing a dart at whoever's the cheapest. I'm probably just taking whoever's the cheapest because I think like you said, it's kind of open, so any 3 of them could really take over that spot. Tyreek Hill has spoken really highly about Cornell Powell, all the work that he's putting in this year or in the offseason. He said that he was silky smooth in his route running ability, and with his 4.47 40, he does have the speed to burn down the field that the Chiefs are looking for. Mecole Hardman, I feel like, is kind of in the doghouse at this point right now. He had a couple blunders in the playoffs. I know he had that fumble early on against Buffalo. And then I'm pretty sure, wasn't he the one that lined up off sides on that field goal attempt that led to a Tampa touchdown?
He also Mahomes was pissed at him because he didn't run a route the correct way and almost cost Mahomes an interception in the Super Bowl. Mahomes didn't name him, but he pretty much did without saying his name. So that's not good either.
That actually happened 2 or 3 times because strictly for the pod, I went back and I looked at a couple plays from the Super Bowl, and I counted at least 3 plays where Mecole Hardman is not even looking for the football while Mahomes is throwing to him. Like, he's not even looking at the ball, thinking that the ball is coming later, or he ran the wrong route or something like that. So I feel like Mecole Hardman he's talented, but he did see 62 targets last year, but I just feel like they don't really trust him right now at this point. Maybe he can change his mind in the preseason, or if Powell has his rookie struggles and Byron Pringle does turn 28 mid-season this year, and he only had 300 yards in the past 2 years. So, and that's with the lack of reliable playmakers and injuries that they've been having to the receiving core. So for me, like I said, I'm probably just taking whoever's cheapest and just hoping that the guy that's cheapest hits. And I'm pretty sure that's probably Byron Pringle or Cornell Powell at this point. I'm not sure. I don't have the ADP in front of me, Jeremy. I don't know if you do or not, but I'm probably just taking whoever's cheapest and just hoping that one of them hits.
Fair. I like that. So real quick, Tyreek Hill then, do we think he finishes top 3 this year again? Dave?
Yeah, I have him as a top 3 wide receiver.
Ryan?
I think he's my wide receiver 1 right now as things stand.
Fair enough. I have him in the top 3 as well, so guess nothing too exciting to talk about there. Tyreek Hill's still good. Travis Kelce, do we think, obviously we already kind of hit this with talking about Darren Waller, but Travis Kelce, what can we, I guess we'll kind of change the question up a little bit. What can we expect from him as the tight end 1 most likely? Do we think that he's still still as far as he was last year ahead of Darren Waller and or George Kittle, or do you think someone at least like closes that gap? Dave?
I think they close it a little bit. I don't know when the cliff is coming for him. I think we'll be able to tell during a season when it is, but he's at 1,000 yards in 5 straight seasons, a tight end record. I think right now you have to project he's going to get another 1,000 yards. And he's obviously a big red zone target for Patrick Mahomes. So I don't think it'll be as big a gap as last year, but I think he'll still be firmly the tight end 1.
Sorry, how early are you taking Travis Kelce? Say you're in a dynasty startup and or we'll say just redraft. Tight end premium. We'll go with that.
For both?
Yeah. Like how early would you take him in redraft and how early would you take him in dynasty?
In a tight end premium redraft league, obviously he's probably going to be for me, a top half of the first round guy. In just like regular redraft, I don't usually get him too much just because I'm not a tight end in the first round type of guy in a normal redraft league. I think that handicaps my team too much. So I'll try to, get one of the second or third guys. And if I miss out on them, then I'll just pick from the bottom of the barrel at the end and stream if I have to. Side note, there needs to be a tight end streamer guy. I don't know if that exists out there, but that's an idea for people that struggle with the tight end position, find good matchups and pick tight end streamers. But as far as in dynasty, probably to me, I still would take him in the second round. But I think he has 2 or 3 more good years in him.
All right, Ryan, how about you?
Are you asking me where I'm taking them?
I'm asking you all the same questions I just asked Dave. Do you need me to repeat them?
All right. No, I should be right. So I think he's still a tight end 1, first in air yards, second in red zone targets, second in fantasy points per route run last year, second in yards per touch of all players. Next highest was 12.1, and he was at 13.4 per touch last year. He's the man until proven otherwise. I mean, he's essentially a second wide receiver 1 on your team. He was wide receiver 4 last season, directly behind Stephon Diggs. So I can't move him off of tight end 1 until he just shows that he just can't do it anymore. For some reason, they change up their offensive scheme, which I don't see that happening. In terms of redraft, I'm kind of with Dave here. When I'm doing redraft leagues, I don't like to take tight end too early just because, like you said, I feel like it handicaps my team. I usually go running back heavy in redraft leagues. So I'd probably take him in the second round of redrafts. And dynasty, if it's tight end premium, I'll take him in the first round, but I'm probably not taking him even in the first half in the first round of tight end premium either. Because if it's tight end premium, it's most likely super flex as well. So at least in the leagues that I've seen so far. So I'd be going quarterback there.
Fair. I mean, for me, I'm always out on Travis Kelce, and it's not because I think he's bad. I just think that his value is too high. Like David said, I kind of wait for that just because you got to take him in the first or second in most of these leagues. And then for me, I'll wait and I'll take, it's a drop off, but you can get Kittle and or Waller to an extent in like the third to fourth. And I feel a little bit more comfortable there, but most of the time I miss on those guys too. And I just end up with going with like a Hawkinson or a Fance at like 7 or 8. Or like David says, a lot of times I end up punting and I end up going with a high upside guy like an Irv Smith or a Adam Troutman or someone like that late. So for me, I'm not high enough, or I think that taking tight end sometimes can handicap your team, but it also is an advantage. So for me, I always struggle. Tight end's the hardest spot, especially those three. If they're on the board and I'm sitting there in the second, third round, it's a hard decision for me because, like Ryan said, like I like to go with running backs because they're going so quick. Or if you're in super flex, quarterbacks are going. So I tend to not have a lot of shares of these guys. So I don't know, but I like you guys' answers, and that sums our episode up. Dave, why don't you let everybody know who joined late, where they can find you and what you guys have going on over at Triple Play.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. This was fun. It was great breaking down all this stuff with you guys. You can find me on Twitter at dmendio2, and all the stuff I do is at Triple Play Fantasy. I do some baseball articles for Fantrax, but pretty much everything else, Triple Play, the YouTube channel, we're trying to grow. We're trying to hit 300 by the end of the week. I think we're at like 284, 285 now. And, athlete interviews, fantasy analysis, and entertainment is the three we try to bring you from all three sports, baseball, basketball, football. So if you like more than just football and you want to check out some fantasy baseball or basketball stuff, we've got plenty of content that comes out. So, just check us out anytime and let us know if you enjoy our content.
Yeah, I agree. They put out some really good stuff, and they have added a lot of good analysts on the football side to the recently. So a couple new shows you guys dropped too that are pretty good too. So Ryan, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you?
Find me on Twitter at Mackie_FFB. Dave, I just want to say thank you for coming on. It was a lot of fun talking to you. I'm glad that somebody had the same thoughts as I was for a lot of this stuff. And
Ryan's been getting beaten up the last couple shows.
No.
I just sit back and let him do it too. So
I did go through your guys' Twitter feed on Triple Play prior to the show, and I do like a lot of your guys' stuff. I was honestly surprised I wasn't following you prior to the show. That kind of like a shameful downgrade to myself, but I'm gonna be honest. But because like I said,
new, we can let it slide.
You guys put out good work, so I mean, I'm honestly surprised that I wasn't ahead and shut up my timeline. But then again, it must mean that Jeremy's not retweeting anything either, so I can't feel too bad about it. But no,
that's not true.
It's funny because the account is my brother who runs the account, and it's like I usually will tweet out a lot more like fantasy stuff and like food and all that, but my brother always just tries to do like entertainment tweets from the account because he's like, I like to give a breath of fresh air from just everybody talking about blah 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 blah. And like today he did something like he was like, what was the last thing you bought, and then you have that for life or something like that. And so it's just like, if speaking as somebody that obviously I know I'm biased, but I do enjoy when he comes up with these weird things to put up just as a break from the normal stuff we always talk about each day on fantasy Twitter. So
yeah, especially now. I mean, fellow analysts. I mean, really right now it's a lot of like the fellow analysts, and there's not many like fans, I guess you could call them, or like the normal fantasy type players. And so like I think that's a great break. I do enjoy like your guys' stuff that you guys put out every now and then. That's just kind of something a little like lighthearted, even if it's anybody, you know what I mean? You see a lot of it out there, so much appreciated. And again, like Ryan had said, I'll second that and say thank you for coming on, Dave. It was a pleasure. And you guys can find me at Popes FFH on Twitter, and any of my articles over at Yards Per and or the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. And until next week, take care.